Hey everybody, let's talk about traction puzzles. I like story games, but sometimes people come by and they say things like, why do you like all these games full of easy puzzles? Isn't that pointless? Isn't that just artificially extending the length of the game? No, the easy puzzles are what I call traction puzzles. They exist to let me be that character within that world. They let me grip the game so that I can really get into it. I think this is an important concept, and it has implications beyond just adventure games and story games. So let's talk about it. Keep in mind this is just me talking. This is not some agreed on industry standard, but it's a topic that is interesting. So let's get to it. Traction puzzles serve a similar purpose to a mechanic in Breath of the Wild. In Breath of the Wild, there's this mechanic where you can take control of Link and have him walk around. The world is vast and it's full of interesting things to do and places to go and people to see, and Link is very good about going to all these places. He's great at navigating the world. There are some navigation challenges that are hard, but for the most part, they're easy. Link can scramble down a hill and ride on a horse and then jump on a rock and jump off of a rock and climb a ladder and then go hang gliding. Second nature to him. And because you're controlling him, it's second nature to you. The whole point here is that by controlling Link, you get a deep insight into how the game works. You get to grip the game. You know what Link can do, where he is, where he might go next, what sort of things he wants to do. And you understand the world better since you're within the world now. You understand how things unfold and how things are arranged. The fact that you can make Link walk around lets you grip Breath of the Wild so that you can really enjoy the game. It's a traction mechanic. Now, if Link did all of these things on his own without your input, the game would feel distant and glassy, and you can feel that by simply watching someone do a Let's Play of Breath of the Wild. Even if you enjoy the Let's Play, you're not Link. You don't feel that immediacy and that connection to the game world because you do not have the traction that requires, or that provides. Now, Link is a kinetic character in a kinetic world, so you make him do kinetic things. But in a story game, your story character is in a story world, so you have to do story things. One kind of story thing? Traction puzzles. So, I would say there are three basic concepts that help to make traction puzzles work. Here they are: personality, presence, and pacing. And I'm bringing them up now so that when I give you an example of a traction puzzle, we can talk about how it fulfills these. Let's talk about a pretty good one. In Life is Strange, because obviously, in Life is Strange, you play as Max, a photographer with some social anxiety. Here's her camera. And one of the puzzles in the middle of the game involves you having to steal a drug dealer's book of customers. And the drug dealer is sitting at a diner eating beans. And I think that most people remember this scene pretty well if they've played the game. In this scene, you have to steal his keys, distract his dog, and loot his stuff. It takes about 10 minutes. It's quite a bit more involved than that summary makes it sound, but it's a really great traction puzzle. Let's talk about why. First things first, personality. The whole point of a traction puzzle is to let us be the character. So this is an important way to make sure that we have to make sure the puzzle is about that character doing their things. And this is a perfect way to do that. If someone else was put into this same situation, they would not solve it the same way. The solution is uniquely Max, and that means that we really get a sense of how Max approaches things and what it means to be Max. Especially at this moment, because Max is starting to come into her own. She's starting to get confident. She's understanding now she can do outlandish things because she can rewind time. So she'll dump the drug dealer's beans on the floor or call him names. These are things that she would not have even thought about doing a couple hours before because she was such a social wreck. Her powers play an important role here, and I don't want to understate that. In a story game, the powers of the characters almost always reflect their personality or their personal challenges, and that's definitely true of Max, whose powers to rewind time allow her to undo her mistakes, and she's, paralyzed by the fear that she'll make one, so that really works. Her power reflects her personality, and therefore when a puzzle involves her power, it really expresses her personality. You don't have to do that, though. There are plenty of puzzle games where the characters have a personality and they don't have any special powers, like Guybrush Threepwood, whose only special power is to hold his breath underwater for, 10 minutes? But the puzzles he solves are uniquely Guybrush Threepwood puzzle solutions. You're not going to have anybody else who comes up with the same set of solutions. If you're playing Space Quest, nobody else is going to come up with the idea to use plungers on a wall to keep from getting sucked out into space. That is a Space Quest puzzle. That is a Roger Wilco puzzle. You're not going to find anybody else who comes up with that idea. It's not that he has any special powers, it's just who he is. And, obviously he's going to use a toilet plunger because he's a janitor, right? This sort of approach doesn't have to be comedy-centric. You can use it on any kind of character you'd like. But the point is we have to be the character. And there are too many of these games where the puzzle doesn't actually reflect any sort of character. Like, oh, do this wiring diagram puzzle, or this piping puzzle, or find the key, it's under the couch, or any sort of other generic puzzle. That's not going to let me be the character because anybody would do those things. So a good traction puzzle will let me be that person specifically. They'll really give me a grip on who that person is and what they believe. An example of how this can go wrong is in Dreamfall, The Longest Journey. You play a lady from the countryside who's coming into the town, and the whole point of the game is that she's got her head screwed on straight. She's not, unicorns and butterflies nice, but she is nice. She does respect people. She tries to do the right thing. She gets annoyed at people who are annoying, but she's not zany, and she's not bitter, and she's not evil. But the problem is the puzzles don't work for her personality. Now, she does have full voice acting, which means a lot, which means even if the puzzles don't work for her personality, we still get a sense of her personality because she talks. But the puzzles themselves are really strange, like, oh, pull a ducky out of a ravine. Okay, that's really not something that really makes me feel like I'm her. It's a generic task. And she's also got some that have really weird personalities, like, oh, look, here's a guy under a lamppost, right? And for some reason we want him gone, for reasons that are never really made very clear. So, we're talking to him, we're teasing him, and he's teasing us back, and we're having a pretty good time of it. But there's a puzzle, so what are we going to do? We're going to poison some candy, feed him poisoned candy, make him throw up, make him get in a fight with a janitor, and then later on we're going to go ahead and blackmail and trick the janitor too. Like, oh my god. This is not the character I was playing. This character is super bitter, and just, those puzzles are brutal, and there's a lot of them. It's something that made it very hard for me to play the game, because the puzzles were either completely flat and personalityless, or they were way too sharp and had the wrong personality. None of them really gave me the ability to get into the game world, because I couldn't be her. I couldn't be the character, because her personality just wasn't reflected in the puzzles. Similarly, if you look at Life is Strange, the puzzles that people don't like are the ones where the personality doesn't come through. There are puzzles where you have to find 7 beer bottles, and it's like, oh great. Anybody would go and do that puzzle. It's like there's nothing Max-ish about it. Similarly, there's a puzzle early on where you dump paint on a girl because she was sitting in your way. And that makes Max out to be a total bitch, which the story wasn't portraying her as. So it was like, oh, what's going on? Why is it like this? If the point of a traction puzzle is to let you be the person, the main character of the game, then the puzzle needs to be arranged around their personality, their characteristics, their powers, all of that stuff. And of course, their characteristics and their powers need to be arranged around their core personality and their personal objectives. So it all has to work together. And I think that that's sort of a thing you get your mind around to, and then your mind just has no problem with it. You can just start going. Once you understand how things lock together, you're like, I need another puzzle that fits the character. I've also built this power that fits the character, and their job fits them, and their skills fit them, and everything fits them. So I can use any of these, and they'll all work. Just mix and match. Now, if personality is about the character, presence is about the world. Because the point of a traction puzzle isn't just to be the character, it's also to be the character within the world. So the traction puzzle has to be within the world so that I can really get a sense that the world exists and that I'm within it and that it's a thing that I want to know more about and that, I need to be wary of or take advantage of. So I need the traction puzzles to go somewhere. I need them to interact with the world in a way that is meaningful to the character. Like if you're playing Link in Life is Strange, yeah, that would be very weird. If you're playing Link in Breath of the Wild, Link can just run around in circles or do jumping jacks all day, but nobody wants him to. The point is that he's within a world, and the world is interesting. So you run up a hill, and you look over a vast landscape, and then you hang glide. We need the same thing in traction puzzles. The puzzle has to interact with the world. It has to move through the world or change the world in some way, in a way that makes sense for our character. And in this case, for example, she's trying to steal his book of customers. So it makes a lot of sense that she would be doing this puzzle. She's actually trying to accomplish something. There are plenty of puzzles that don't. Like, today Max has to do a long series of puzzles to open a door that is locked from the outside? What? That doesn't make any sense. And because it doesn't make any sense, you're like, this is pointless. If we removed this puzzle from the game would be the exact same game. And that's not good enough. A traction puzzle has to let the player character move through the world in some way or change the world in some way that makes some sort of relevant sense to them as a character. The whole point is to show how they interact with the world and what the world means to them. So obviously, you need to make sure that the world actually changes or influences or does something. Now, the last piece of the puzzle for me, at least today, is pacing. Puzzles have to have pacing just like any other kind of gameplay. If Link is running across a mountain, you're going to want to make sure there's stuff on the mountain for Link to find and see and do. And when he gets to the far side of the mountain, you need him to do something else, not just run up another mountain. Navigation puzzles aren't the only thing in Breath of the Wild, and you need to make sure that there are other things involved. Similarly, traction puzzles aren't the only thing in your story game. You need to make sure there's a story game. Think of it like this. If you're doing nothing but giving the player traction, then they're not going anywhere. The whole point of these kinds of traction puzzles is to let you grip the game. They aren't the game in and of themselves. If you just do traction puzzles, you're just stuck in the mud. And this puzzle is pretty good about that. Not only are there story beats before and after the puzzle, but you also have a lot of other elements to this puzzle. This is a set-piece puzzle, and there are other things to do. You can look at ants and talk to homeless people and chat people up at the bar, talk about vans or trucks. There's so many other things that you can do in this scenario. You're not locked into the traction puzzle, which means you can sort of wander away and come back and think about things and work through it. And there's a couple of different phases to the traction puzzles, so it really allows you to get a sense that the game exists. It's not just a puzzle that's here for you to do a puzzle. There's more things in this world, and you're within this world. This is just a basic summary of how traction puzzles might work and how you might want to think about them. But fundamentally, what I'm thinking about here is just the fact that so many indie story games use completely anemic puzzles that are not representative of the character, they don't have a presence in the world, and they're paced wrong. And the thing about it is that we'll see some really good games from these people, and then they'll put out a real stinker because they're not thinking about these characteristics, which means that these characteristics are not well understood. People haven't been thinking about puzzles like this. You can see that in something like Don't Nod, where their most recent game, they made Life is Strange, but their most recent game features powers and puzzles that have nothing to do with the main characters or their struggle. And that's just not good enough. It makes it very difficult for me to get into the game. I can't come to grips with the game because you haven't given me any good gripping points. I can't get traction because I can't be these characters in a way that is uniquely them, and I can't interact with the world in a way that is uniquely how they interact with the world. So I'm not going anywhere. I'm stuck. I either have no traction or I have nothing but traction. Either way, it's bad. Anyway, just a simple little thought. Have a good one.